about what's happening in the world around us is happening. What's happening in you is what we're going to be focusing on. Specifically, we're going to be looking at those of you that are the most neglected. Those are certain styles and temperaments that don't demand attention, don't go center stage, don't require other people to focus on them. You are the salt of the earth. We're going to be talking about those temperament qualities of the heroes in the Bible who bear the burdens, support the processes, nurture the families, care about the details. We're talking about the dominant S types and C types that make up the strategic part of the body of Christ that get the job done. So you want to come join us. And then the team members, of course, Carl and Mercedes are going to push back and challenge me. You're going to see live moments, unscripted moments where we challenge each other on these things. And in many cases, we have to change even mid-course. We have to correct what we're thinking here because we have a real debate about how personality, temperament, the Bible, and destiny work together. Don't miss it. I'm looking forward to this broadcast with you today. This is our level 10 moment. This is the moment when we literally pull back from the rapids that would suck us in with other subjects. And you know, the Lord says something to me the other week, which was kind of so incendiary for my audience, for so many of my people that listen to our broadcast, that I thought it's worth saying. Stir things up. It came about as a result of somebody texting something to me. A chat. I always read the comments in Facebook. When I get to YouTube, I just read them. I just obsess over that. So then I write back at 2 a.m. I write back and stuff. I don't even know if people get it. I don't know if they're even reading my replies because they'd have to go back to the chat thread to see if I replied.
Did you tag them?
If you hit reply, it normally puts the person's name and tags them, and then you put the...
They would get it?
Yeah.
Oh, good. Well, anyway, and somebody said, Lance, nothing matters unless November 3rd is clarified and Trump's put back in office. And it struck me as so weird when I read it that I really felt like I could hear the Lord. It's like the verse comes back to me from Jesus talking to Peter, where Jesus says to Peter, when you're old, you're going to stretch forth your hands and another's going to take you where you would rather not go. This signifying by what death Peter would glorify God. It's a discussion about Peter's martyrdom, and that he was going to have to stretch his hands out and get tied and taken to the arena and killed. Now, Peter turns around and says to Jesus, he sees John, he goes, what about him? And it's very clear because that's what the Bible says. What about him? Because he's nosy, he wants to know what's going to happen with him. It's like, you know, what's going to happen to him? Like, how's he going to die? And Jesus looks at him and goes, if I will that he stays till I return, what is that to you? You follow me. In other words, nosebag, what I do with him is my business. Your job is to do what you're called to do. That's what I'm going to hold you accountable for.
Good.
And I could almost hear the Lord say, I'm not going to say I did hear, but I'll say it was like this. Here's the incendiary part. You ready? If I will that Donald Trump comes back into office, what is that to you? Your job is to follow me. Boom. If God wills that America is saved, what is that to you? Your job is to follow Jesus. I hate to tell you this, folks, but we got a whole world out there. It's not all America. And go into all the world and preach the gospel. Maybe something you never dreamed of having to do to interrupt your retirement plans. But you might just go out of this country somewhere. You know, when the persecution hit Jerusalem over Stephen's death, that unfortunate development in the church, you know, in the news, led to them being spread all over the area preaching the gospel. In other words, persecution has a tendency to scatter the fire around. And suddenly Philip's in Samaria preached the gospel. So all that to say this, your job is to do what God called you to do. Level 10 living is about nailing the assignment God has for you regardless of the assignment God has for Donald Trump. It doesn't involve your destiny unless you're called to be his advisor. So let's pick it up where we left it off. Yes, Mercedes Sparks and Carl Wallnau.
Hi.
Welcome.
Dun, 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 dun. I was going to say, what do you think, since we talked about D's and I's last time on the Level 10 podcast, what do you think Donald Trump is?
Well, let's go ahead to the four graphic here. We're going to go to this one right here.
Okay, you want to go back to that graphic?
Yep. And this is the characteristics that are easiest to determine, the positive characteristics of each style.
Just to clarify, are you not wanting this one with a little more detail? You would like to go back to the four faces of God?
You can go there. You can go there if you want. Stick with this one if you want.
Yeah, I like this. I like
you
this
don't have to do what I asked you to do. You can do what you want.
Do it.
No.
I
Do it here.
just wasn't sure what you
Priorities
were
are getting immediate results, taking action, challenging himself and others. Boy, that's what we want. Motivated by power and authority, competition, winning. You're going to win so much. You're going to be sick of winning, and then success.
Dude, honestly, I am. I'm tired of winning.
Fear,
thank you, Donnie.
losing control, being taken advantage of, vulnerability. Consequently, he never admits, he's wrong or made a mistake. What you're going to notice, cameraman, go back there, please. What you're going to notice, self-confidence, directness, forcefulness, and risk-taking. Certainly his characteristics. What's the limitation? Lack of concern for others, impatience, and insensitivity. If you have to say, why is the church world all offended? Why do people just find him so offensive? It's because he doesn't demonstrate sensitivity to other people. And so I would say, yeah, no kidding. And probably that's not a characteristic that's really critically important to me in a commander-in-chief anyway. I wanted to get results. So we're going to now move into the C's and S's. C's and S's. By the way, what you can see there with Donald Trump is any strength overextended becomes a weakness. His aggressiveness constantly alienates the college-educated female in America. Is probably the demographic he's got the lowest traditional response from. Because they're so woke. Woke academia amongst the females.
Okay.
In the city areas, in urban communities. I'm just telling you what the data says. They find his personality abrasive.
So let's do I's though. So we've done D's. We think that's Trump.
No. We already did the I's. We did the D's.
Well, we didn't do the limitations of the I though.
Classic I behavior, ignoring the limitations of the I.
All right, Carl, let's go ahead and cover that. What's the limitations of the I's?
Self-awareness. No, impulse. Oh.
Do the whole thing. I don't think we did the whole thing because this is you to a T. Can we please read the whole thing? It is you 100% to a T.
For what it's worth, honestly, you sound far more enthusiastic about this than I do.
We're interrupting the broadcast.
I'm just thinking like it is so... Like when you listen to this, and your viewers should be able to see this 100%.
Why are you talking about? You're saying the I is me?
You are an I 100. Forget the D.
Not 100% of the time.
You're just challenging at times. Like you challenge others and that type of a thing. And you like results too. But listen, okay, I'll read it and then Carl, you read some of it too, okay? So priorities, expressing enthusiasm, 100%, Lance rants. Taking action, yes, you absolutely do that. Encouraging collaboration all the time. You're a gatherer, a networker. Okay, motivated by social recognition.
Say it again.
Social recognition.
One more time for the people in the back.
Social recognition.
700,000 downloads this month.
How many times are you on a broadcast and you're like, let me see those likes. Let me see those hearts. Ooh, I mean those hearts up. I mean those hearts.
Pick up the pace. We have S's and C's. We promised we would do it. We're already back. Like narcissists. We're back on the D's and I's.
We haven't gotten to the good part though. Okay, so group activities. Yes, you just said you wanted to have a big event in the last broadcast. Friendly relationships.
Would you guys like to do that? I'd like to have a level 10 trip. Wouldn't you like to come to Dallas? We're going to do a level 10 and we'll do your profiles and we'll help you get on the stage and activate your gifts.
You will notice enthusiasm. You will notice optimism. You will notice sociability.
Optimism is optional.
You will notice talkativeness is really what you're going to notice.
Yes. Okay, so fears, social rejection, disapproval, loss of influence, being ignored.
Oof, like getting deplatformed on TikTok. Don't get him started.
Or, I mean, I won't go into all of the idiosyncrasies, but this is definitely, I think this is you. Like when people misunderstand you, when, you know, you've popularized 7 mountains and when people don't recognize that, like you will make jokes about it on stage, you know? So I think it's a really interesting element of eyes that's what I'm saying. God's a God of order. There's millions of people out there just like you, Lance, that these are the things that you're concerned about. Okay. You'll notice charm, enthusiasm, sociability, optimism. I'm talking this. I just realized that. That's what you just said. So you'll notice that about them. Okay, now limitations, Carl.
There are none. No. Impulsiveness, disorganization. You're going to notice a lack of follow through. And this is something that I personally experience as well. My personality stack is DIC. Oh. And so one of the reasons that I got involved with the 4 disciplines of execution was because of my own lack of follow through. And so that's, you know, there are ways to outsource that type of thing.
And what are the 4 disciplines of execution?
Focus on the wildly important goal, act on lead measures, monitor your lag measures, make sure there's a cadence of accountability. That's number 4. And also have a compelling scoreboard. That's 3. So those are the 4. Boom, baby. And that's my high D temperament flexing.
I
also
love
a little
it.
bit of C.
I love it. And so like when you look at Lance's office on the broadcast, you could see piles, not files. So we look at disorganization like that. But to you, there's an order to it. If anybody ever cleans up your piles, it's like, I can't find those things. I strategically put them in this pile on the floor, the third one in.
Someone removed my article. Now, for those of you that are conscientious, let's talk a second about this particular strength you have. The ensuring accuracy, maintaining stability. Notice the space between the word maintaining and stability. Somebody with conscientiousness would never make that graphic error. Clearly, this is sorry it happened to you, of all people.
That's so funny.
There's a little space there. Maintaining stability.
What are they maintaining? Stability.
Challenging assumptions that because they're driven by certainty needs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Motivated by opportunities to use expertise or gain knowledge or attention to quality.
Yes.
Fears criticism, slipshod methods, being wrong. These are people that are extremely defensive about being wrong. Some people I know are extremely defensive about being wrong, but it's more high I related. They don't like the fact that they're losing social recognition.
Right, more so than having actually invested the time, their knowledge, their expertise into developing this thing, right? Because that's where the C really shines, is in the preparation phase.
Absolutely. You'll notice precision, analysis, skepticism, reserve, and quiet. And their limitation is they're overly critical. Their tendency is to overanalyze, and they isolate themselves. Now, I'll give you an example of this. I had a young lady in our church named Claire years ago. And Claire, well, she was easy to overlook because she isolated herself. And one day, I thought it would be so good to recognize Claire and let the church know what a tremendous job she does setting up the platform before every service and the holidays. It's all perfect. It's meticulous. And I said, Claire, I just want everyone to know that that's your gift because you're such a talent and such a gift to all of us here at the church. And she turned red and met me in the hallway right after that and said, why did you humiliate me in front of all those people?
Yep.
You see, I did not realize that the high I, which is me, doesn't mind the social recognition in front of others.
Doesn't mind, meaning I like it a lot.
The high C prefers to have that recognition in private. If you're going to affirm somebody that's a pure C, you don't want to really do it in public because you'll embarrass them. Because they have a perfectionistic tendency and they might feel that they're looking pretentious or they're trying to want attention. They'll find a flaw, even if they manufacture it. But if you do it at all, do it in private and do it in sincerity and do it accurately. Because if you compliment them for something and it's not really what they did, but someone else helped them do it, they'll diminish it by talking about how it wasn't all them. So I'm just saying to you, these things are real, folks. They really are.
Yeah, I think too with the C's. So I didn't realize this. I had my mom do the test, and I mean, I just realized it like 2 years ago that she is actually a C, and I didn't get it until she was kind of like working with a new company, and it was during the training time, and they were teaching her how to use the systems, how to use all these different things, and she had made a couple of mistakes, and so for me, I don't mind mistakes as long as I get the result. I don't care. But for a C to make a mistake, it is a huge deal. It's like they'll beat themselves up. I should have known better. I could have done this differently, and almost a lot of times that super perfectionist side of them stops them from advancing. They stop moving forward because they feel like I'm actually not good at this. I shouldn't do it at all. And so it's really interesting to see the C style. And like I said, I didn't even realize it till recently, but it is that the over analyzing that element. I've seen that too, where it's like, so my mom and I make really different decisions. Like when I came out here to work for Lance, we were flying out and she came with us and I was like, well, we're going to find a house. And she's like, we might not find a house. It's like, it's a big decision. So we make decisions super different. I flew out, found a house I liked, bought the house, moved in. Where my mom to buy a car, I mean, months of research, months. I mean, like goes to Kelley Blue Book, looks at the ratings, sees what the safety is, price shops at like 8 to 10 different dealerships. I mean, they're really an amazing style and they're so needed. Like when we write a book, Lance and I are like, let's get the book out. Lance is like, let's innovate it some more. Let's change it a little bit. And so if you ever read a Lance Wallnau book, it's been innovated so much and we're just like, hey, let's just get it out, that we really need more C styles on our own team because they're like that steady factor. They're a little bit slower than how we might actually act. And they're great at things like that, like editing and refining different concepts. So it's, again, like to me, it is just the body of Christ that where one is weak, that's when you add in the opposite element to strengthen the team dynamic. Yeah.
I very much agree with that.
What are examples of C's, like professions of C's?
Engineering. Okay. Absolutely. STEM fields, science, technology, engineering, mathematics. That's really where you're going to want to see C's.
That's why the Asians, I don't mean to be racial here, but the Asians dominate MIT and the sciences because they are trained at an early age in mastering the details of math and science.
Yeah. And you know what my mom did for 30 years? She would figure out, there would be a sales rep that would go in and sell a phone system to like a university. And my mom would figure out how many phones, how many servers, how many cords. I mean, it was like she would map it all out, that level of detail. Yeah. I mean, that's a perfect job for a C, and then come up with the accurate price quote of what that's going to cost everybody. So
no, if you need a fact checker, please get a C.
This is where you want a pharmacist, your accountant. You want those people to be
air traffic control. I wanted some anal retentive about what's on runway B.
Totally. Yeah. Like not us in any way, shape, or form.
Oh my gosh, keep the high eye. That's why I'm worried about this equity stuff, people. This equity thing it's at the wrong criteria, man. If you put a person in there who's a high I, but they're the right skin tone or something, you're in trouble. But I don't care. You put a white person in a role where they're involved with any degree of precision management. I promise you, if they're an I, D, they're gonna move recklessly. It's just has nothing to do with race, has to do with temperament.
Yeah. So one thing as far as temperament goes, there is, like you mentioned, there are certain differences with different nationalities and even culturally on the West and East Coast. So in the West Coast of America, where Silicon Valley is, a lot of innovation, they have this saying that done is better than perfect. This does not resonate with the C culture at all. Perfect is as good as it gets. Why would you fall short ever? Why would you allow yourself that wiggle room? You don't want wiggle room. You want it to be perfect. So having that idea in mind, when reaching out, when working with people, will definitely help you bolster alignment in the right areas where you need to.
Totally.
Now, what's interesting here is I want to go to the S, is that in the Bible, we do have C personalities. So,
but no S's.
You have, Dr. Luke, curiously enough, seems to be the one gospel writer who wrote the book of Acts and the Gospel of Luke, who actually wrote more than anyone else, other than, I guess, more than the Apostle Paul, even. And his language is specific, as a doctor would be. He utilizes the Greek in a way that none of the other writers did, with specificity and detail that the others missed. But he was the traveling companion of Paul, who was a D. Mm-hmm. And a DC, actually, if you look at it technically.
Oh, no.
And so Paul was a debater. Paul was a Pharisee. He had the overriding drive was he was an aggressive fact checker. And when he was against the church, he was a terrorist. But when he was converted, he was a terrorist against the devil. That DC pattern would not compromise. Even when Barnabas, who was an IS, how do you know that? The Bible said he's a son of encouragement. The DC teams up with the IS. And we're going to talk about how God does this. Mercedes, you're a DI.
Well, D. I'm really just straight D.
Well, you say that, but I promise you, your main, you read the chat threads. If people are critical of you, if they say unkind, you have an I that's there. Larry isn't SC.
Or what, Carl?
Or is it that she doesn't want to lose the social standing that comes with the power, the authority? So she wants to be more in line with what is going to continue to bolster those strengths.
I think it's more so like when people say things like, you have nothing to contribute. But I know the wealth of knowledge that's in my brain and like the incisive commentary that I make all of the time. So I'm like, clearly you're not listening. That's what I end up thinking. But I want to say something because you made me think of a great idea, Lance, is that the DC, what is the number one complaint for doctors?
No bedside manner?
No bedside manner. And like, that's really where you do also want to see the person who's doing your brain surgery or pulling out your, gallbladder. You want to make sure they actually take the gallbladder out. You do want somebody that's a C in that style, but they are very like quiet, reserved, internal a lot of times, and they are not empathetic or agreeable or receptive. It's very matter of fact. And so you see it in those styles,
But also a lot of that is programmed out of them in med school. Like almost immediately once you get accepted into med school, you have to start following doctors around. You have to watch these procedures being done. And if you have empathetic nerve pain while you're operating on somebody with nerve pain, you're dead. You're dead in the water. There's no benefit to you being on the cutting room floor because now you're feeling bad for them. You're trying to, you're trying to do something.
Police officers.
Yeah.
Same thing.
Yeah. Instead of being the social worker.
All right, let's do the most valuable one in the body, which is the S style.
Oh.
Yeah. And so when we look at these styles now, let's take a look at Abraham is a classic S style. So when God wants to choose the father of a nation, when God wants to pick a temperament to be the father, he finds the S temperament to be what he wants. Abraham's S temperament means that according to this, he's giving support, maintaining stability, enjoying collaboration. He's motivated by stable environments, sincere appreciation, cooperation, opportunities to help. His fear is loss of stability, change, loss of harmony, offending others. You'll notice that he demonstrates patience. He's a team player. He will have Lot traveling with him, his nephew. Even when it's to his detriment, he has him with him. He's calm approach. When his wife is, pursued by a foreign king, he doesn't go after the battle. He doesn't go fight like Samson. He basically says, "Hey, man, tell him I'm your brother. They'll kill me. If they know I'm your husband, they'll bump me off." He's a good listener. He's got a humility about him. He's the last person that you see. His wife wants to have the child. She makes him go into Hagar to get a baby. Then he has Ishmael. Then she makes him give up Ishmael because can't have Ishmael and Isaac in the same place. There's competition. And he accommodates. So you see this kind of, this ego isn't dominating him. He's trying to make other people happy. The limitation is overly accommodating. So you see, he probably shouldn't have accommodated his wife in the first place. Having Ishmael produced the Middle East tension we have today of Arab and Israel. Thanks,
Abraham.
He has a tendency to avoid
Daddy
change. If God isn't pushing him into the next thing, he's happy where he's at. And so, and there's an element of indecisiveness at times.
And what was the challenge that the good Lord decided to issue to Abraham with Isaac?
Well, it's a very profound one, isn't it? It's where you have to sacrifice your only begotten son, and do so on the mountain where I tell you to sacrifice. Imagine for this style.
Yep.
I mean, if it was a high D, Father, it would have been painful. But listen,
right here,
we got to do what we got to do. But it was a high S, and of course, what's so let me read. Let me go. We got on page 31.
I mean,
Yeah,
even to go into an unknown land for somebody that's all about steadiness.
Oh, yeah.
And God's like, it's why it's credited to him as righteousness and faith, you know?
There again, so what does this suggest to you? It suggests to you that knowing your temperament is important because you need to know how you're gifted and how you're wired, but it also tells you how God might challenge you.
Yep.
So if you are someone with a strong need for social approval, you might recognize that rejection is one of the crosses you'll bear. You might also have to recognize that not being well known and not being invited to the cool club is one of the consequences of you taking a stand for an unpopular belief. But it's mortifying to you. It's death to you. Where someone else, it wouldn't matter. But these are the important things that because the devil will get you in the area of your design. Mm-hmm. A D could care less about what other people think, so long as they're respected.
Yes.
The high I doesn't have to win as long as they're clearly everybody's favorite.
As long as they win socially.
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
the win is in a different area.
Right.
But this stuff is so powerful to get this material.
I want to say, like, you can see this because Annabelle's an S. So when we do the profiles, Annabelle's on the S side, and you see this in her ministry. You see this in the work that she does. It comes into her naturally in terms of being giving support, maintaining stability, enjoying collaboration. What is she working to do? Provide stability in parts of Fort Worth and families that have constant instability. She's being a force of stability. Help finding places for young single mothers and their children to live,
let me tell you
furnishing
something.
their homes. I mean, it's
These
overflow.
girls are survivors, and they're liars because they have to game the system. To them, Annabelle's the first altruistic, philanthropic, genuinely no agenda, non-government person they've ever met. And so she'll catch them lying all the time. And like, I just, to me, I keep coming back to, this is where I know I'm a D. I'm an ID. If you really want to know what I'm at, it's called a persuader profile. The D is 2 levels below the I. And you guys, just listen, if we can get this for you, I need to get you all a profile customized. Wouldn't you like a customized profile? How about a customized profile with a coach call? If I could set it up for you so that you could get your own, because you have all 4 of these. When we go through this, you would almost think that the lottery says, you're an I, you're a D. No, you're all 4 of them in different ratios. And here's something we never talk about. The low characteristic is as revealing as the big characteristic. So for instance, if you're a low C, what does that tell us about you?
A lot.
It means you make decisions based on gut intuition. You don't look at the facts. You have a feel. If you're a low S, what does it mean? Well, nothing. Oh, yes, it does. It means that when it comes to communication, you're not going to be the one opening up. Someone else needs to initiate the communication on an important subject. So
naturally, that's your natural proclivity.
Huh?
That's your natural proclivity because you can train it. So you can get that. Yeah.
Well, but you won't train it unless you're aware. Unless you're aware. That's what I'm saying is, wouldn't you love to have your own customized formula graph that reveals what level of each of these you have and how they play together? Annabelle has that high S quality and a high I. So she's S over I. I'm I over D. Between the two of us, we have to hire C's because we don't have it, or Annabelle has to do the C work for us.
Yeah, and I think it's important too because, well, I think a couple of different things. One, the inventory you're talking about, they don't actually make that one anymore. And I like that one. It's all circles
The 4
now.
columns. Yeah.
It's not even lines. But we know which one you're talking about. That's a cool one. But when we look at different styles, I think like you're saying, it's so important to recognize that you have all 4. And the way that, Carl and I were trained in this is that it really, if you're a natural S, you can still have those D consistency and those C consistency task orientedness. It's just a stretch to get into it. And it's normally an energy suck.
Yeah.
It normally exhausts you to have to sit there and read through the spreadsheet and, document everything, file your taxes. It's not that you can't do it. It's just, it takes a lot of energy to do it versus what you're just naturally inclined to do.
Yeah.
So I think that's important to mention to people because I think we can put them in a box. I'm like, well, I'm only an S or I'm only a D. And so like a lot of times I get like, especially like when I started a new company or something, I'll come in order to manage people, I'm very, almost have C tendencies where it's like everybody's at an arm's distance. I have to assess where everybody's at, who's staying, who's going, who's getting a new seat on the bus. And so I have a distance in me, and that comes from the D, but I have to be intentional about being more I and more S, listening more, relational more, less task, get it done. It's your job, just do it, and more relational with people. So again, I can do it, but it's a stretch for me to move into that. So
one of the ways that I recommend doing that for high D personalities like us is to remind ourselves that the people are the task. We actually do have to have this workable relationship with other people in order to get the results that we want to get to.
That's good.
So, because, the left side of the circle is task oriented. That's the DC pattern.
All right, put this one up. Put this image up.
Sure.
So that people can see what Carl's talking about.
Yeah, and we're also talking about becoming unstoppable. That's where this particular excerpt is from. For those of you who are viewing,
Oh yeah,
at
we
home.
didn't show people where we're coming from. We're
Sorry,
doing the manual, becoming unstoppable out of our material here.
Yeah, and we're going to page 27 for those of you at home who are joining us. We're looking at the fast-paced, the slow-paced, the task-focused. Yeah, here we go, right here. The task focus is going to be on the left, and those are the people who are D and C patterns, right? There we go. Yeah, we got Dad popping up over here.
What does it matter? They're not showing.
And then on the right side is the people focus. And that's going to be the I and the S temperament. So that's a lot more my mom. She's very people focused. She's very caring. She's very nurturing. And it is a little bit of a stretch for her to go into those C temperaments or the fast, focused. I'm sorry, not fast, but the focused, intentionally methodical, on task, very much. A leads to B leads to C. This is the order. Don't go out of order.
Well,
there's a reason for it.
And I would say, like, when I first started, there was a time where it took for even Annabelle and I to get into a flow because we're opposites. So she's an S style, which is highly relational, and I'm results oriented. So when I got here, it's like, hey, let's get to profitability. Let's start doing events a little bit differently. And so like one of the very first events, like Annabelle and Lance kept calling because they wanted to comp like half the people coming. And I was like, okay, yes to comping people, but you each get like 10, it's like, we can't do everyone. We can't cut a deal for everybody, And so you get like a table. And so it's things like that where that really was what was happening. I mean, when I first started, it was like they gave so much. They were so generous that they couldn't even, take care of the staff that they had at that time. I mean, that was 6 or 7 years ago. But that's a real constraint of the S's. Yeah. And the D's have the problem of, well, don't give anything away. We're gonna do it. We're gonna charge for this, and it's too much. So that's why you need everybody.
And the S there, I'm sorry, it's an anorexic looking oxen. I don't know. I was realizing now how lean it looks. We need to add a healthier looking oxen.
That's a pretty healthy looking ox.
I don't know. It looks anorexic. I'm counting the ribs, the boniness of it. I want a hefty fat ox.
Okay.
That's a little.
Even though we have like 3,000 of these laying around, we will print more with a fat cow in it for you. Like, it's not a problem.
I'm just noticing.
We'll do that. Constantly innoting.
And as far as value is concerned, if you can say these are just laying around,
constant useless innovation too. Use unprofitable. Moses,
do.
Reprint.
God teams people up with the opposite. You marry the opposite ladies, men. Your children are going to be different than you. This is like God loves and delights. It's kind of like some kind of a cosmic roulette wheel here. It never matches things up the way you think it will. But what it means is that Abraham, the S, marries a high D wife. The idea that the male is always the dominant and the S is always female is American, not Middle East. Abraham's the S that marries the high dominant woman. In terms of teams, Aaron and Moses. Moses, the meekest of all men, is your SC, S profile. But actually, I would say that, yeah, he's S. But his brother, Aaron, is talking all the time. He's a high I. He is the mouthpiece for Moses. Actually, Moses has a lot of C, obviously, has to be, because he goes up and gets the first 5 books of the Bible.
Yeah, we put him under
and
C.
doesn't innovate.
Yeah.
Aaron, on the other hand, while he's gone, lets a party take place, gets out of control, and then lies about the details when Moses challenges him.
You think about Moses, too, at the burning bush, and he's almost like, no, I don't want to be the guy. Send somebody else.
Yeah.
Send my brother.
Anyone else.
Anybody but me. And God gets frustrated with him, right? That sounds like a C. We're like, I don't want to be in the spotlight.
Because they don't want to. And what's interesting is, and this is so cool, do personalities change? Do temperaments change? They do. Over time, what you'll see is, and this is kind of curious, the D's can move towards C, which is a strange thing because you see that aggressiveness when you're young, but then after a while, you just want to manage the portfolio and have other people do the battle. So that happens. Moses went from being, remember, he killed an Egyptian. He thought he was leading a revolt. And later on, he goes into the wilderness and just wants things to be done, just wants to avoid any hassles and get it right. And basically, that's the one God chooses. So he goes from D to C under pressure over time. I's move to S. I'll see this in retired people. When they were younger, they were dynamic sales, marketing, and all that. And when I meet them in their retirement, they're more like the grandchildren and the routine. And it's like, what happened to the stage personality? Well, they settled into but the thing is, you move on a continuum of task or people. Mm-hmm. You don't frequently flip and go from task to people or people to task.
Very true.
So whatever your orientation is, your core orientation, mine will always be people. I'll tend towards S when I get older. I won't go to suddenly being a C.
Especially with grandbabies. You're definitely going to go to high S.
Yeah.
Yeah. I will be, because that's where the predictable track is.
Marcus.
Peter and John. What do you think they were?
Flexors.
Oh, that's interesting. What would John be? That's really interesting. He's got to be. He's so relational. Head on Jesus's chest. The one who Jesus loved. But he does have a little bit of a bragging component when he's writing that gospel. But I would put him.
Maybe a little I.
A little bit of I. I feel like maybe like an SI. What do you think, Lance? So relational. That's why I would put him in that S.
I would say this is the guy that God gives the book of Revelation to. He gives. I would say he has that focus, that kind of like eagle characteristic, which is he's a loner. Mm-hmm. He's able to be on the island of Patmos in isolation. He's there just with Jesus. Mm-hmm. He has that. So I would say he's got a lot of that CS characteristic. And I think it's important, the disciple whom Jesus loved.
Yeah.
I think it's important to know that every one of these 4 has an ego.
Yeah.
Every one of them is human. Everyone wants to be celebrated. But if you're Mozart, you might want to be celebrated for being the greatest composer ever. So John was competitive with Peter, but it was within the CS style, I think.
Yeah. So to go back to something that you were mentioning earlier, as far as Abraham not necessarily having the ego of the S temperament, but I think that is where the ego lies, is in that stability and providing that level of stability and comfort and being person-oriented.
Every style has ego.
Oh yeah,
it's just gratified in a different way. In his case, brilliant. The ego is. It's the fact that he has a great dynasty, that he's got all these sons and the stars of the heaven, and wow, I'm going to be a king and a ruler. But and I asked the question earlier, and I want to lose it, is what was the Peter John style? Because there's a reason I'm saying it. God puts together teams that are opposites. John looks to me like the CNS. He could be a son of thunder, but that's a C. A C when they're right. They'll attack the world because they've got the facts.
And they know they're right.
And they know they're right.
Yeah.
So they're
like Charlie Kirk. Charlie Kirk's
a lot of that C characteristic. But Peter is clearly an ID. He's a D in his flash of temperament and his taking charge, his cutting off the ear of the high priest servant. He's an I in that the moment that the social pressure gets on him, he's ready to run. But God put an ID with a CS together. In Paul and Barnabas, God takes a DC, the rabbi, who debates temperament. Double task focused Paul with double relational IS. Son of encouragement is what Barnabas is called. And how are they going to break up in their team? How's they going to end up having their team destroyed? It'll be over John Mark, who is Barnabas's nephew, his sister's son. Well, the kid evidently quit the team and went home because there was too much persecution and pressure. And Paul made the decision he's never going to go back on our team again. Why? Paul's task focused.
Yep.
The DC's task. And he screwed up, and this task can't be compromised by sentimentality. Barnabas says, he's my nephew. Give the guy another break.
Yeah. Well, I think Paul also, he had a criteria there that it had to be somebody that has been with us the whole time, was what he was saying. And so that's why I think, those two split up. Is like you're saying, is crazy that it's over someone, that the S is like, no, he's going to come with me. And Paul's like, no, he hasn't been here with us the whole time.
Yeah, you bring up an interesting point. It could be that they did the different churches they had ministered to. And it could be that Paul says, yeah, we have to have let's pick somebody who was with us, not someone who left us, because that person has to be in continuity.
Yeah.
Correct.
And Barnabas said, no, let's bring the fight was over.
Correct.
The relationship that Barnabas had with Mark was affection and nurture as an uncle, and Paul was a general who said no.
Yeah.
He walked away, he stays.
Well, and it's so crazy too when you think about God's the one that put them together, that they cast lots and it fell on Paul and Barnabas, and they commissioned them and sent them out.
No. That's drunk history.
No, it's not.
No, Matthias the lot was cast to replace Judas. With Matthias,
No, they prayed
it was
about it.
laying on of hands in Acts chapter 13.
Am I getting them confused?
Yes, they are.
But I thought that they commissioned both of them, though.
They did, but they didn't cast lots.
This is like Annabelle's story about high-fiving on the road to Emmaus.
I know, and exactly. They didn't cast lots for this. This was the certain prophets and teachers at Antioch were gathered together in Acts chapter 13. And the Spirit said, separate unto me Barnabas and Saul for the work whereunto I have called them.
Well, look at that. It's even worse. If it's a word of knowledge and they're paired together and then they're like, no, we're frustrated with each other. We're leaving.
No, it is. It is worse because God put the team together and they broke it up.
I love that a couple of D's and I's are talking about S's and C's. And now we're getting caught up on who's more right about biblical trivia.
No, Lance is normally always right when it comes to Bible stuff.
No, clearly.
I definitely know that.
Acts chapter, I even give you the verse, Acts 13:2. I can tell you where it's located.
Yeah, so it's good.
But the point is, people,
It's good. Love it.
let me clarify something else. That Abraham can fight. Abraham can go high D. It's just what would provoke an S who is nurturing and family oriented to suddenly go ballistic.
Mama bear.
There you go.
After the fam.
This is critical race theory. You start taking 60% of America's personalities are high S, 60, 65%. But when it's a mother and you touch her 5, 6, 7, 8-year-old or younger, you have just poked the bear. So Abraham, when his nephew gets kidnapped, Abraham gathers his 300 household servants. You find out that they're not only household servants, they're Mossad commandos, because where they traveled, they had to protect flocks, they had to protect herds, and they had to protect them from tribes and gangs. So these were some rough hombres. They made up Abraham's personal bodyguard, so to speak, as this patriarch traveled with his 7 streams of wealth around the Middle East. They took on 5 kings. And that meant five other tribes. And they killed them. They wiped them out. They defeated them decisively. And Abraham was able to rescue his nephew. And then it dawns on him, oh boy, he's got retribution coming at him from 5 separate nations. They could mobilize and come back for a counterattack. And God knows that Abraham is now nervous because he went high D because his nephew, it's family. Don't mess with family with a high S. They'll shock you. But then when it all calms down, he goes, man, I'm in some deep doo-doo now because I've got all these angry tribes with their kings, the second in command, taking over now for revenge. And God reveals himself to Abraham on that night and reveals himself as his defense. Most people miss the beauty of the Bible is that when Abraham most needed God to say, I am your shield, I am your protection, and I'm going to take care of you because you're going to have a son. I'm going to be giving you a son. In other words, God lets him have a revelation that I'm your supernatural protection. Don't worry about that. Don't let fear get on you. You got a job to do, which goes back to my opening comments in the monologue I gave her, a short, brief opening. You got to know what your assignment is. Seems like we're going down a rabbit hole, but you see, part of your assignment is which one of these are you? And how do you manage you? And how do you handle the people that are closest to you? And they're not like you. And they won't respond to the same things you respond to. So you have to, with wisdom from God, know how to speak the language they speak.
Can I say a couple things?
Yes.
Okay. So I'm going to say a couple things. So I want to read, this is the line when Paul and Barnabas separate in 1539. Then there arose a sharp contention so that they separated from each other. Barnabas took Mark and sailed to Cyprus, and Paul chose Silas and departed, being commended by the brothers to the grace of God. And then he went to Syria and a couple other places to visit the churches. So I think it's important, yes to opposites. Yes, normally God will pair you. Well, one, God's going to pair you with the most effective person that you need for the calling of God that's on your life.
That's it.
And so sometimes I think that's going to look like your opposite. Sometimes it's not going to look like that. And I think it's important to know that because there's lots of people who are in relationships who might take this test and go, oh my gosh, we're a CD. We're both CD. So then, there's something wrong with us. But no, God might have a special assignment for you. Like you and Annabelle, you're an I, D, mainly I, and she's an S, I. So there's similar tendencies in the I area. But honestly, Annabelle's such a blessing to you because like sometimes you can get in like a real funk. Like I think most guys can just get inward focused, thinking, all this stuff. And Annabelle is all about what's in the here and now, what's going on, and just like shakes things up and just snaps you out of whatever funk you might be in. I see it happen all the time. And so I just think she's such a great pairing for you. But then Larry and I are opposites. So I'm a DI and he's an SC. So when we did the relational one out in wherever we were, San Diego, and we were talking about conflict styles, but we had the line graph. And so mine is like a little like a line that goes this way, and his is a little person that goes like a line that goes like this. And I feel like it looks like a little person that's worshiping. Like if I put a little circle in the middle, hey, but it's so neat when it's opposites like that as well. And so anyways, I just want to encourage everybody that if you're not a direct opposite, that's okay. But it's so important. It is so important to know what motivates you, the things that might trigger you, things you're afraid of, and then to know what that is in your spouse, to know what that is in your parents, to know what that is in your kids, because that's how everybody communicates. And what's so cool about tools like this is like if you go back to that other graph that we were on a second ago, if you know what people are motivated by, that's such a great way to encourage people, to bless people, to give gifts. I mean, like, start tapping into what people are motivated by.
Click on, go down these graph images on the side here. You got some stuff here.
Yeah, so this is the whole profile. I mean, it starts off up here. It gives you like a summary of, basically what we're talking about. What are the 4 different types? And then it shows you, hey, this is where you are. So this is actually Lance when he took this test, whenever the last time it was. This is your profile. So you kind of fall right on the line here But you have a lot of I tendency.
Also, if I could just interject,
Yes.
it also is very dependent on what your mindset is going into it. So they recommend doing one version where you're at ease, where you're at rest, where you're with your friends, your family, in a relaxed environment, and then one when you're in a workplace environment.
Totally.
And because there are different dominance things that will manifest or come to the forefront depending on what you're doing and what's surrounding you.
Totally. So it gives you a summary of really what the DI style is. Then it's going to show you like your priorities. So this goes a little more in depth in terms of what we were just
look how
looking at.
detailed it is. Lance, you probably place a high priority on making swift, immediate progress like others of the DI style. You may be much more adventurous and daring than most, and then getting results. Your DI styles often are ambitious and focused on achievement. But so wouldn't you love to have this, is what I'm saying, customized for you so that you could see how you function. And and I just think that we ought to try to make it aware. But what I want you guys to do is I want you to take action, get the Becoming Unstoppable, because next week I'm going to be focusing on the prophetic process for bringing your future into the present. The temperament part's important because in convergence, you're bringing to maturity your gifts, your temperament, your talents, and your acquired skills. Your skills that God has been putting in you, your temperament, are all part of the gift mix for what you're ultimately called to do. The more you understand it, the better it is to manage you, and the easier it is to discern when the devil's messing with your head. I mean, you know, if you've got a significance need, then feeling like you're being marginalized or somebody else is upstaging you gives you a cue that that's your design, that you better be managing. You better be putting to death what is earthly in you. If you want to be able to live in the anointing that God calls you to. But I love this material. You guys want to get a hold of it? You want to go to, level10living.com. This is the module on becoming unstoppable. It's like 4 DVDs of training. You get the whole training thing in there. Plus, if you want to go for the full enchilada, we're going to go through all 4 courses. We're going to go the Mountain of Me, all of these series. You get 20% off if you use the code word podcast. 20% off podcast. And I'm thinking of having an event. It'll be a lot more fun if you guys have gone through the material and we don't have to go start from, square one, but we can go right into perfecting and developing and manifesting what you got. And we'll figure out if we could do a webinar is good, but I'd love to do the webinar with a live audience. I'm looking at Mercedes.
That's what I'm saying. It would be like a Zoom call with like 1,000 people. It would be
but I want to have people in the audience that I could work with for the Zoom call. So I could bring people up on a stage and show people, volunteers from the audience can come up and we could work with them.
Yes. Now, do you see how your I tendencies are getting in the way of the results of let's just get this out to people? Because now I got to delay, find a venue big enough for all those people, look at the cost involved, and I go DC. But, if that is what you would like, we will do.
On page 30, you can find the overextended strength of the high I. Influencers are so good at persuading, they might sell more than can be delivered or get so infatuated with their own ideas that they lose all objectivity about them.
That's true. You can get so infatuated with your own ideas that you lose all objectivity. That's absolutely true.
We could make it happen. We could do the Grapevine Theater maybe.
I was just going to say the Grapevine Theater.
I love grapes.
Wouldn't you guys love to come down to the Grapevine Theater? We'll bring kazoos. We'll have a party. I'll do some music. It'll be a Periscopian reunion too. If you're ever in Periscope, it'll be all Periscopians come back for the Periscope party.
So earlier we were talking about the kid.
On our next broadcast, we're going to be talking about team dimensions and the strengths of the creator and the refiner.
Well, we went really, really over. Thank you, Carl. Thank you, Mercedes. 52 minutes ago so fast. But we have just scratched the surface. But we're going to move on now because we're going to move on to the power of clarifying your purpose and your prophetic vision. Because you're managing you, right? And all the little buttons that get pushed, that's your temperament. But we're also going to be looking at what has God shown you about the future. How do you pull the future into the present? We're going to talk about the desire, which is how God gives you the desire for certain things as an indication of what's showing up. And then the expectation, how to pull back into the present, answered prayers, and then how to focus on intentionality, which is not being distracted as you stalk the calling of God and stay in the current of what God wants to make manifest. Powerful stuff. It's all right there on page 46. Page 46 is where we're going to go next week. All right, page 46. Get the manual so you know where we're going. Becoming Unstoppable. Lance, this level10living.com. Use the promo code podcast. We'll see you next week.
Did you enjoy this latest episode? Please remember to share it with your friends, because the more knowledge you have, the better equipped you are to navigate the world. See you tomorrow.